it was sort of like a whole lesson in intention versus method. So my
Mm.
intention was really clear that I wanted to earn a living musically, but I was open to the method. It didn't have to be, from doing a Broadway show or doing jingles or doing it. I was open to the method. And I think because of that, um, so many different methods showed up that I never even thought about. Because some of them, like I started doing concert work. I didn't even know that that existed, for someone in my world. And that's been a huge source of income for me for the last 20 some years. So, um, and then I had an agent that was booking concert dates for me, and they retired. And I thought, well, I can do that, and so I started a booking agency, which now has like really grown. And I'm really proud of that. And that is allowing me to actually, leave the country and work remotely um, from Lisbon, which I'm so excited about because um, that is a well-oiled machine. And I have an amazing assistant, Greg, in New York. And I was just in Lisbon for a month, and we tested it out, and it works.
Welcome to the Camp Fifi Uncensored podcast with my dear friend Lee Lessack. Episode 58, everybody. This is so exciting, and I am so happy to introduce my dear friend Lee, who I have known since 1987. Very funny story behind that. You'll have to listen in on to the podcast to hear how that came about. Join us to hear what our conversation covers, which is kind of a vast culmination of sorts as artists, performers, and how intention versus method developed into lifelong careers and opportunities, and where Lee is heading today. I'm super excited for you to join us and hear our really fun conversation. So grab that coffee and cannoli and pull up that chair and join us around the campfire for this fun conversation of part one with my dear friend Lee Lessack. Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Well, so I'm just going to kick it off and say good morning, Lee Lessack, my dear longtime friend, and thank you so much for joining me on the Camp Fifi Uncensored podcast. We've got lots to talk about, and it's been so long since we've really been able to have a heart-to-heart chat that I just want to kind of go into the background of who you are and how we know one another. We met, I believe it was in 1987.
I think so.
In Chicago.
Lord and Taylor.
Cosmetic counter. Where I brushed you off.
You did. So rude.
I just wonder, like, is that in my character? Was that like something that I've carried
Totally.
forward? Have I? Wow.
I don't know. You had no time for me.
Because I had to get to the Clinique counter because I think I must have been running a couple minutes late.
Right.
And you were with
then 2 weeks later, you went to Rosh Hashanah services with me, so you made up for it.
And I think your mother was a little interested in the possibility of a future.
There you go. I think that's the last time that I went to Rosh Hashanah services.
You didn't want the pressure.
Without you, it would not be nearly as fun.
Well, I thank you, and I'll take that as a compliment, frankly. And no, I think, the beauty of our relationship that is beyond unexplainable, because look, at you and I have both come in contact with lots and lots of people in our lifetime, lots. And we're just people. And the beauty of us, like the asteroids colliding in that moment. I mean, how many people have approached you at a cosmetic counter saying, do you want to have a smell of this perfume or cologne? To have that connection, here we are all this lifetime later, is really kind of sweet and unusual, but
Totally
for all the right
random.
reasons. And
Right,
so
exactly.
random. And I've been really philosophical about that randomness lately, ironically, that you should use that word. I've been saying to like Randy, and what are the chances of these moments happening? Like, was this in the plan? Was this not in the plan? Like, how is that? And that our lives, you and me, like how it's kind of like this kind of DNA dance. It's like we never get to really spend time together, but there's this love and connection and a desire to be in touch. And it's not even like we really work together, or we get to break bread together, but there's just this kind of like brotherly, sisterly glue. I don't know how else would you describe it.
You did good.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah,
Good.
you did
So
good.
we met in Chicago randomly. 2 weeks later, that I didn't remember, was just 2 weeks later. That was quick that we're going to Rosh Hashanah together. I mean, I moved in with people probably sooner than that, but
Right. But not going to temple.
not, I mean, given the choices, it was safer going to temple.
Yeah, crazy, huh?
So crazy. And so crazy because, life decisions, speaking of which, was it in 88 or 89 that you moved to LA?
I think it was 88. It could have been 89. I am so bad with dates. Like I know people, I'll see their posts or whatever, and they're like, 17 years and 13 hours ago, I had a pancake at IHOP in West Hollywood. Just like, I literally don't remember what happened yesterday. I'm just not a date person,
Yeah. What is your strength?
but
What would you describe your strength to be?
well, I don't know. I mean, I think I'm like a people person. I'm a connector, but I'm
Mhm.
just not good with dates, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. It's that
Yeah.
kinesiology. It's like the visual versus the auditory versus the touchy feely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely
So,
think you are a great engager, and I think you're a great networker, and I think you're a great connector. I think that's why I think it's interesting how in 96, after coming to LA and you became a personal initially, like when you came to LA, did you have anything lined up? What was the catalyst? I don't remember what
no.
caused the move
Well, the
initially.
catalyst was I spent a winter in Chicago. That was
There's
the
that.
catalyst. And, I had an apartment in New York.
Mhm.
But I didn't want to go back to New York. And I had come out to LA to do like a seminar, like a personal growth meditation seminar in the desert. And I kind of liked it. And so I was like, well, you know what? I think I'll take a chance and just check it out. And if I don't like it, I had an agent at the time in Chicago, and they had offices in LA. So I thought, oh, maybe, I can, break in the business or something. I don't know. So I came out here. Yeah. And I decided I was not going to wait tables again.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, I went to a temp agency. I worked for like uh, one of the, um, I don't know whether it was B'nai B'rith or Jewish Federation. I was like selling ads in their newspaper. That that was lucrative, and
That was
I
lucrative. I love that. Are
not.
you being
And then
sarcastic or were you being sincere?
no, it was not lucrative. and and then I went to a temp agency, And my first assignment was working for a producer at ABC Circle Films, which back then, ABC did these movies of the week.
Yeah.
And Circle Films was the division that produced the movies. And I was working like as an assistant to a producer because her assistant was getting married or something. So I was there for 10 days and it was right around Thanksgiving. It was kind of dead. There wasn't much going on. But she took a liking to me. And I remember she was going, she and friends of hers were flying this chef down from San Francisco who had written this cookbook about like breakfasty foods. And they were gonna, a group of them were gonna do like a cooking class. And so she showed me this cookbook and she said, these are the 8 recipes we're going to cover. Can you make, copies for everyone? Well, little did she know that my father owned an office supply store in Philadelphia. This is before Staples.
Wow.
So when it comes to Xeroxing, I am very well versed. And so I made these like brilliant, like spiral bound books for each of the people that were doing this cooking class. And well, that was it. She just thought that was the best thing since bran muffins. And so when I was leaving, after I was there for like 2 weeks, I think, she called me into her office. She gave me a gift, this beautiful leather wallet. And she said, I really want to help you. Leave me your resume. And I left her an acting resume and a business resume. And I don't know, a week later, 2 weeks later, she called me. She said, listen, a very good friend of mine is a celebrity and they're looking for a personal assistant. And I think this would be really good for you. You're new here. You'll learn your way around the city just running errands for them. And they're good people. I mean, even if you just do it for 6 months, it'll be a really good exercise for you. And I then got hired by Henry Winkler and his wife, Stacy, and was with them for 7 years.
Jesus,
so that
I
was
don't.
like,
I
that was
didn't
my
remember.
entree into LA. And
7
and it was
years. I didn't know that it was 7 years.
Yep, 7 years. A bar mitzvah, a bat mitzvah, and 3 houses.
That's a lot of production.
Yeah. So that was like my entree into LA. And I think that it was a great learning ground. And it gave me like a lot of courage. I was like kind of fearless. And so when I left finally, which was never easy because it was always like super busy or there was another event happening or whatever. And they were like my family. I mean, I adored them. But I realized I'm never gonna like get promoted to Henry. So
Yeah.
there was a cap on my existence there. And anyway, so I left and I had saved up a lot of money and I wanted to record an album. So I recorded an album and then I started a record label because who was going to take my calls, right? And I started like producing, and I don't think that I would have had the guts to do it if I hadn't had that job. Like I just sort of gave me confidence, and yeah. So that was kind of my entree into LA. And so I think I left there like in 1993.
Okay.
So that was 30 years ago.
That must be
Almost
why
30 years ago.
Yeah.
And yeah. And then I've never had a job since then. I mean, other than my own companies, I've never worked for anybody.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because the reason why I was like 7 years, because I ended up not following you and following you, but I knew LA was going to be the future. I just didn't know when. And of course, at the time, that's when I had, connected with Dan and did that whole thing. And we were together actually for 7 years. So it makes sense, because even though we moved here in 92 and we split in 93, ironically, this is why this is a little bit of a fog to me about your trajectory, because I was like, why didn't I realize you had been with the Winklers for 7 years? Well, because clearly that was in the late 80s into the early 90s. And it felt like you had left actually soon after I arrived here, but a lot was going on with me, and then you had your stuff going on with you. So now it makes total sense, Lee. Isn't that funny? After all these years of
Mm-hmm.
knowing each other, this feels like the first time I'm hearing all of this, which warms my heart,
I
and I
decided to
love that.
save some good stories for this podcast.
But I mean, that's the beauty of the sitting down, so to speak, because we don't
Right?
do this. So I
I
love that
know.
you like filled in those blanks, because I always ask myself, what made you all of a sudden launch LML? And I was like, and how did that happen? And you just shared how that happened and how you
Yeah.
had learned from this trajectory of working with initially the ABC exec and then moving on to Winklers, how that gave you the confidence, it gave you the
Right.
tools and the sense and the leverage fiscally and maybe
Right.
even connections.
Right. I mean, I truly only began this record label for my own album. That was it. That was as far as my vision was. It was like one thing. And then but I worked really hard to, market and get press and whatnot. And I'm like nobody, literally. And my album was reviewed in Billboard magazine and Advocate magazine. And so I got a lot of attention for being nobody. And so other artists started reaching out to me asking if I would distribute their album, which I never thought about. I'll never forget, the first artist was Brian Lane Green. He was a big soap opera star and Broadway Tony nominee and whatnot. And I was like, well, I guess I could. I remember like going to the bank and opening up a separate bank account for his album. Everything was manual, calculating royalty. It was all manual. And then somebody else approached me and I thought, well, if I'm calculating for 2, I guess I could calculate for 3 or 4, and then 6 months later, I'd be like, well, I guess I could calculate for 6, and then it just, the machine just sort of left the station, you know what I mean? And, now I've got, I don't know, 150 artists from all over the world that I distribute for. And so that's been like a really a nice little gem for me. Not that, it doesn't pay my mortgage, but it certainly has given me entree because people know the label. And so that's been a good thing.
Fiscally, like there's so many rewards in life, and it's not always in dollars and cents that wealth or abundance is represented. It's in the value of the relationships and the connections. It's in the value of the experience. We all need money to function and we both know as artists the importance of, like you said, if you're a nobody in a world of somebodies, it takes something, and it takes a lot of persistence and belief and chutzpah and confidence and all those things, and then luck and trust and timing and blah blah blah, and it never ends.
No, and I can't remember who said this to me or when it was said to me, but I distinctly remember that I made the choice that I wanted to like pay my rent musically, however that appeared, whether it was me performing or singing, whether it was, the record label, whatever. And so it was sort of like, maybe I read it, I don't know, but it was sort of like a whole lesson in intention versus method. So my
Mm.
intention was really clear that I wanted to earn a living musically, but I was open to the method. It didn't have to be, from doing a Broadway show or doing jingles or doing I was open to the method. And I think because of that, um, so many different methods showed up that I never even thought about. Because some of them, like I started doing concert work, I didn't even know that that existed, for someone in my world. And that's been a huge source of income for me for the last 20 some years. So, um, and then I had an agent that was booking concert dates for me, and they retired. And I thought, well, I can do that, and so I started a booking agency, which now has like really grown. And it's, I'm really proud of that. And that is allowing me to actually, leave the country and work remotely um, from Lisbon, which I'm so excited about because um, that is a well-oiled machine, and I have an amazing assistant, Greg, in New York. And I was just in Lisbon for a month, and we tested it out, and it works. It really works. The schedule and communication and everything else. And so, you know, um, I'm really proud of that. That I have somehow been able to navigate um, many different layers of work, all music related, and it's a great balance for me because I am, most artists are, very it's very left brain, very creative, not business minded at all, and I'm like right down the middle. I really enjoy that, and so that's been a great balance for me because for the last 20 some years I am able to go out on tour and you know uh, fulfill my artist needs, uh and run a company.
I also
So
think I mean, honestly, again, so many things have just been so seamlessly answered, and it's so funny to me that we've known each other so long, and I just love that this kind of full circle of information is just like, oh, there's that puzzle piece. It made me like flash back to us in our early mid 20s when we met, and how it's because of you uh, that I started exploring like a spiritual path. I don't even want to put it into that terminology, but it was kind of like the the Marianne Williamson moments and the science of the mind moments and all that kind of stuff that made me think about this again, this journey, this like path of yours, of mine, yours particularly because the reveal of all that is that you flowed. You didn't like put yourself, you didn't try to like put the square peg into the round hole. You stayed open to what was possible, knowing that, like you said, your intention versus your method, which made your intention like almost reveal as being coachable because you allowed yourself to flow and stay present and allow for all those
right,
doors to reveal themselves and open up and build on that like a snowball effect, consciously or unconsciously. The consciousness was that you wanted to be around music. Did you always know that you wanted to sing? Like, what, as a little boy, as little Lee, what was
Well,
coming up for you?
yes, I always wanted to sing, but I wasn't ever really that good. Um, it reminds me of something dear Mama told me just a few years ago, how she felt so bad for me when she came to my high school musical, because she was like, you wanted to sing so badly, but you were so awkward and your head was really large for your body. I'll leave you with that.
Oh,
Anyway,
and go out
so
into the
I
world and be who you mean to be.
right. So I always wanted to sing, but I could always get cast because I had a decent enough voice and
You
was
have a gorgeous voice.
in tune, but I hadn't really found my voice. And when I was living in New York, it was so overwhelmed. I was taking voice lessons, I was going to acting school, and then I came out here, and while I was working for the Winklers, I started taking voice lessons just, for an outlet. And I'll never forget, I was, I don't know, 27 years old, 28 years old. And I was in the shower and I was doing like the exercises that my voice teacher had given me. And it was like something shifted, and I heard a sound that was uniquely mine. And it was a moment where I literally, what I saw was that my voice was an instrument and I figured out how to play it. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, of course.
And that was like a moment for me. And it gave me great confidence because I felt like this is mine. This is uniquely mine. And a friend of mine, or maybe it was this voice teacher, said, you should go. They have an open mic night. You should go. And so I went and I got up and sang a song. And the, the pianist that night was Michael Orland, who,
Oh
of
my
course,
God.
was on American Idol all those years. And he
Yeah.
co-produced my first album. I just saw him last weekend, all these years later. I know him from New York. Anyway, and so I sang a song and I went and sat down, and the manager or owner, I don't know, came over to me and she said, you're very good. Would you like to do a show? And I was like, Sure, what's the show? Your show." I'm like, I don't really have a show. I have one song. And so Michael and I put together, my very first cabaret show. And, the
Was that the
venue loved me
Roosevelt?
because no, that was at the Rose Tattoo
Oh,
on
wow.
Robertson. Yeah. And of course, Henry Winkler came and all their friends. And so the club loved me because it was like a who's who in the audience. And then I would take like a vacation and go to New York, and I booked a night there. And it was it was easy for me in a sense because I wasn't doing it for the money. I was doing it just because I wanted to do it. So um, I did that for a couple of years. I would, do a concert in LA and then go back to New York and do a night there. And I was still working. And it was through that. I'll never forget, after I left the Winklers, I went in the studio to record this album. And a very dear friend of mine, like from high school days, was living in New York, great singer. And I had met a woman out here, and she told me about this organization called Community Concerts, which was like a nonprofit volunteer organization all over, really in middle America. And it was managed at the time under the umbrella of Columbia Artists Management in New York City. And basically, they brought live musical entertainment to the heartland of America. It started out, it was like 80 years old. It started out doing chamber music and classical music. And then, and they would put together like a roster of, a dozen shows. And then they had sales reps that would go out on the road, and they would book in this city and then in the next city, and they were able to route a lot of dates for you. So I called my friend Joanne. I said, listen, I'm going to be in the studio recording this album. Why don't you fly out and we'll go in the studio while I'm already renting it, and we'll do a demo of like just snippets of different Broadway stuff. And we put together this cassette tape, a demo called An Enchanted Evening, the Music of Broadway. And I sent a copy of my CD and a copy of this cassette to Columbia Artists, with a cover letter. And I, I was in Chicago visiting my parents, and they called and they were like, thank you for sending the packet. We think your CD is really lovely, but we're very interested in your Broadway review. You know, can we come see you on tour? And I'm like, I don't have a tour. I have like a 7-minute cassette tape. So I said, well, actually, I'm on tour at the moment in another production in Chicago. It's called I'm Visiting My Parents for Passover. And I said, and Joanne is in New York, but perhaps we could come and do a presentation for you. And they were like, oh, that's fantastic. So I hired a friend of mine, a Broadway guy, to create a 20-minute presentation, which he did. And we did it. And they sat us down on the lip of the stage and they said, we think you're great. We're going to put you in the roster. And I think for like 3 years, they were able to route like, I don't know, 50, 60 cities for us. So that was huge because I had never earned, a dime doing concerts. It was really a great education and learning ground. And I am saying very, very small towns. But we would fly to Minneapolis where their office was, and we'd rent a car or an SUV, and we'd go for 8 weeks, and we'd drive from city to city and do these concerts. And I think back then, I don't know, we probably were making, $2,000 a night, which was huge
Oh, yeah.
to
Oh,
me.
God, yeah.
And this was before cell phones and GPS, and I mean, crazy.
And this was you and Joanne and an accompanist.
And a pianist. Yeah. And we did that for like 3
Amazing.
years, 3 or 4 years. And then they went out of business. And I signed with this agent in Atlanta, and they booked us, not as many dates, but at that point, we could charge more because we had like a touring history. And so they got us, a handful of dates every year, but for more money. So it worked out. And then I started my own LML Music Presents. And, we have sort of a celebrity division. Like we very proudly represent Chita Rivera, who's legendary. And we route a lot of concert dates for Lea Salonga, who's just one of my favorites. And we've got a lot of Broadway names that we route tours for. And then we produce tour tributes, things like this that sell. After all these years, I kind of know what sells. And it's usually either a big name or a theme that people gravitate towards, whether it's
Right.
Sinatra or whatever. So yeah,
Right.
it's worked out. It's worked out.
I mean, wow, what a really cool evolution that you could never, like, if you and I were sitting down in 1987 and we were looking in a crystal ball, no damn way.
No,
I mean,
I didn't even know that concerts like this happened. Like I had no clue.
Babe, I don't even know. Like, I know that I knew you were from Philly. I knew you had come out of the Academy of Dramatic Arts. I knew that we both had that similar background. I also think consciously or unconsciously, the reason why I was drawn to you was because I'm very right and left brain myself, and I like logic, while I also like to have that freedom and that artistic expression. And there's a lot of people who are out there like that. But if you're with artists, a lot of times they're only running on one side of the brain, and then with business, they're only running on another side of the brain. And it's a matter of finding the tribe, so to speak.
Yep.
And I do think that is unconsciously one of those things that why we always respected or understood each other, no matter where we were in life. But I think that when you have all these years later, decades now under your belt, and again, if we had been sitting back in 1987, hanging out at a counter going, so what do you see for yourself in the next 30 years?
Right? It's so crazy. And now, like in this past year, during the pandemic, Mark and I had a lot of time to talk about what's next, and we were really clear on a few things. Like, we do not want to live here through another election, for sure. And we started like just fantasizing about where could we live. There's like nowhere in the US that calls to us. We're not like Palm Springs people, we have so many friends that have, weekend homes in Palm Springs, and then that's where they retire to. But
Yeah.
We're not those people. And there's nowhere there's plenty of beautiful places in the country, but nowhere that calls to us. And I've traveled a lot throughout the country and the world. So, I've been to most cities, I think.
Yes.
And then right before the pandemic, we did a river cruise up the Rhine from Basel, Switzerland to Amsterdam. And we met these guys from LA, but they had been living in Miami, and they retired to the south of France. And they had just recently done it. And so we were chatting with them. We kept up with them really throughout the whole pandemic. And that sort of got us thinking. We knew we weren't going to go to France, but I had another client from my record label, and he and his husband retired on the southern coast of Spain. And he was saying how, the cost of living is so much less, and healthcare and all this stuff. And so we started looking there. And then I think Mark thought that the weather would be too hot in the summer, and he also isn't thrilled with the food in Spain. And so he just started looking at weather patterns. And he said to me one day, he said, Lisbon has the same temperature almost every day as Santa Barbara. So it's a little cooler than LA. I was like, okay. And we started like following these vloggers and whatnot. And it was kind of crazy. And then I started mentioning it to some people, and they were like, oh, do you know so-and-so? No, I have to introduce you because they just moved a year ago. And, so we're like Zooming with all of these people that have a shared process. And it was crazy. It was crazy. And then in November, one of the people we were talking to introduced us to a developer in Lisbon, and he showed us this project, and we like flipped for it. For several reasons. It's the location and the style and everything, but it has like a 600 square foot private enclosed yard. And, with two dogs, we need a yard, and they don't have a lot of yards in Lisbon. We had been talking to people, and they were like, that's the only downside, is finding, a yard for the dog.
Yeah.
There's tons of parks, but not private yards. So we were like, let's put a reservation down on this. Now, mind you, we had been to Lisbon for one day on a cruise ship 18 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And so we put down this reservation. And then in February, we went to London for my birthday. And I said to Mark, we have to fly to Lisbon. We have to like walk down the street and make sure. And it was great. We had done so much research, and with, the internet and YouTube, I mean, we really felt like we knew where we were because we had watched so much content.
Yeah.
And that just sort of started um, this whole process. And then in April, we drafted a contract and put down a deposit. And meanwhile, this is not going to be ready for over a year easily. Nothing happens very quickly. Um, and but in February, when we got back from our trip, I ran into a friend of mine from the neighborhood who, during the pandemic, moved to Montecito. And we were up in Montecito and just went out for lunch and ran into him. And we were mentioning how excited we were about Lisbon. And he said, "You guys need to sell your house now." And I was like, "But we're not going to move for like a year and a half." And he's like, "You need to sell your house now." And I was like, maybe he knows something, I don't know. It's the first house I've ever owned, and we've been there 23 years. So it's like, and thank God, uh, we listened to him. We listened to him because we sold our house in the right moment, on the right day, to the first person that walked through and offered us all cash. And it enabled us to write this chapter in such a great way with no stress. And so it's kind of exciting. It's kind of
It's
exciting.
very exciting. And yeah, I think it's kind of going back to the question we leaned into earlier about random. Like, was that random that person,
Totally random. Well, no. Oh, no, no, no. There are no mistakes. There
No.
are no mistakes. I mean, we have been perfectly guided to
Yeah.
our team on the ground in Lisbon is off the charts, fantastic. And they've all just organically come to us through various people. And it's really nice. It's really nice. So it's very exciting. Very exciting. I have
It
4
is
more
very
weeks.
exciting.
4 more weeks.
And you're out.
I know. I'm not taking this fake tree. So if,
No, I'm sorry to hear that. So in 4 more weeks, will you officially be a dual citizen? Are you already a dual?
No. We are just waiting for our visa approval, which will happen any day now. And then we will, flying over. You have 120 days from the time they put the visa in your passport to enter the country.
Okay.
And
then once
usually, and then about 4 months later, you have a biometrics appointment with the consulate over there, where they fingerprint you and blah, blah, blah. And you have to show whatever documentation, health insurance and a lease or purchase or whatever. And very similar to what we had to show for our application. So then we'll get a residence card, and that will be good for 2 years. And then that's renewed for 3 more years. And then after 5 years, we apply for our passport, and then we'll have dual citizenship.
Okay, so it is an earned thing, and it is a process, and it isn't just handed over, and that makes sense. In regards to owning real estate over there, how does that legally apply? Like, how can you legally own real estate over there if you're not officially citizens? That has no bearing whatsoever because it's an investment as far as they
Yeah.
I love that.
We're paying for it, so.
Yes, you're helping the economy, however, and I mean, you just never know from country to country, port to port, how that all, you
No, and
know.
then once we have our dual citizenship, we can move and live anywhere in the EU,
Yep,
anywhere.
that's
Not that
that's
we're
the
looking to
beauty of the
move, but
EU.
yeah,
No, but nonetheless, I mean, I remember in 98, 99 when that all married, I'm sure for the EU, it wasn't the simplest of transitions,
yeah,
mindfully speaking, because that's a lot of
yeah,
countries to marry together, so to speak.
right, right.
But for
But
anybody like ourselves who thinks as an American, hypothetically, and I don't want to say all of us umbrellaed together, but the fact that the fact that you get to be a part of something greater and have no borders, so to speak.
no,
It's
it's
interesting.
interesting. It's like it's almost if you think of Europe as the US, where but every state is its own country.
Correct.
So like we can travel freely within the US. We can move and live anywhere we want, and it's the same thing over there. So
But it's very interesting that you bring that up because as our careers went forward, yours being the music, mine being makeup and hair and film and television, one of the interesting things when we first both arrived here that's different, um, not a negative, but an interesting application to what you were just describing and what I talk about quite a bit. When I first moved here in 92, I was not yet in the union part of the world of film and television. I was an independent artist and and heading up independent films in Chicago, what have you. When I moved here, LA had most of the country represented. That's so if you were based out of here, that's why there was so much respect for Hollywood artists.
right.
And, not only in this country, but worldwide. And Chicago had a 100-mile radius, and the East Coast had the 13 bordered states. So you would think as an American, you should be able to travel and work anywhere, right? Not
You
so
can't?
much. No.
Wow.
And
Yeah,
now
it'll be
LA's
in
given away everything. I'm sorry.
I know.
LA's
I
given
know.
away everything.
Yeah, yeah. It's a really good time. I mean, the dollar is so it's like it hasn't been this strong in 22 years. So it's just a good time for us anyway to
Yeah.
and much easier for me because my all of my income will be earned in the US. Um, and they have a lot of incentives in Portugal for people to move there. If you're not earning income in Portugal, there's a program that we will apply to, and it waives tax for 10 years. You know, so in 10 years, I hope to be retired,
Right.
so it won't really matter. you know,
Well, and to that point, Lee, I mean, in 10 years, at cresting 70, I think it would be in 10 years. The truth is you're booking, your LML presents still could very much be a very
oh yeah,
affluent, active source of
yeah,
income without you having to put the same kind of effort because of the
right.
team you have
Yeah,
working all of
yeah,
that.
for
Kind
sure.
of
We'll
like
see what
network
happens.
marketing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We'll see what happens in the next, couple of years and how it transitions and, you know, um, but it's a very exciting chapter. It's not one that I ever thought I would be doing, much as I've always loved being in Europe and I've always, fantasized about living there, but not in a realistic way at all. And this just, and certainly not Portugal, like that was never on my radar at all. But it just makes sense because of all the incentives, because real estate is such a good investment there right now,
Mhm.
because in the major cities, everybody speaks English. So it won't be a hard transition. I mean, I really want to learn. It's a hard language. We're going to go to
Yeah.
school into like an immersive program because I really, really, really want to learn it. But I can get by for, until that time when I'm speaking. So, there's just a lot of things in our favor. And just the day-to-day cost of living and is so much less. It's just so much less, you know, and healthcare, it's great. It's really
How
great.
does healthcare work for somebody who has a visa but's not yet officially a citizen? How will that
So
work for you
as
guys?
soon as we have our visa, we apply for the NHS, the National Health Society or something. I don't know, and then we'll get a card, and then we can use public health. But insurance over there is so inexpensive. Like I can get a year policy of private insurance for $1,500. So I'm going to do both. I already signed up a membership with this medical concierge service. So I have like my nurse assigned to me. And I mean, I can text her on WhatsApp 24/7,
Hmm.
and they're amazing. Like they are amazing. They have all my medical records now. And, I'm not on very much medication, but the few things that I want to establish over there so there's no lapse, like they're
Yeah.
doing all of that. And for their service for a year, it was $180. I
Crazy.
mean, it's just crazy. We were there this summer and we rented a farmhouse at the beach in, a town of 4. And Mark woke up one morning and he's like, I think I need a root canal. And I'm like, okay, well, it's Saturday and we're on a farm.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I went to the pharmacy and just got some like Novocaine spray or Ambisol or
yeah.
whatever they have over there. And I texted the woman that managed the rental property, and she said, Monday morning, I will get you into the clinic. And so off we go on Monday. We had like a 5 o'clock appointment at a clinic like 30 minutes away, but it was a sizable little city. And state of the art, state of the art. And they were incredible. And he was examined by a dentist. They did a full set of digital images. And then he went back and they read the results, and no waiting. And the doctor said, you do not need a root canal, but there is a little bit of infection. So I'm going to give you antibiotics so you can fly home in 3 days. And we walked out and paid. And obviously, we have no insurance there. We have our Portuguese tax ID numbers, but we don't have insurance. And the entire thing, including the prescription, was $44.
Incredible.
It's incredible,
Incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So,
incredible.
yeah. So I think that, you know, um, it's definitely different, you know, it's definitely different. They operate like on the number system, like at the deli, take a ticket for
Yeah.
everything, for everything. So, um, you take a ticket for the receptionist to check you in. Then you take a ticket and you wait until your number's on the screen to go to your examination room. Then you take a ticket to pay, and everything. That's their system. But it's very organized. And, you know, so I think it'll be a combination of public health and private health, just depending.
Yeah.
I- That's just my guess. I've been asking a few friends that we've made over there, like, can you recommend a doctor? And they're like, no, we don't have one. So I think that they
Oh,
go to the,
interesting.
the public hospital if they're sick, and it's different. and maybe that's just them, but so far that's been the feedback that I've gotten. So it'll be interesting to navigate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. There's so many questions I want to ask you, and I want to kind of go backwards before I go forwards. Coming out of Philadelphia, like did you see yourself as a little boy just not staying there? Did you ever think about it? Like, did you know that
No,
that was
no, never.
temporary?
Yeah, never thought about staying there. Mm-mm.
Have you ever, because is there even any family left in
Yeah, my
Philly? Is your
sister, my
sister's
sister's
there,
there.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
So do you have any like when you go back there? Like, I love Philly. We've never discussed this. I absolutely love Philly. I would go there for cold case. We would go there twice a year. And I found it to just be such a, well, now look at living there versus visiting. I know it's two distinctly different
Well, it's
things.
much better now. It's much better
Mm.
now. When I was growing up, it was not as good, but they've
Rough.
really cleaned up the city and whatnot. So it's much better now. But I don't have any calling really. Mm-mm.
Yeah. And when you went to New York, you did audition for Broadway stuff. You did do Broadway. I don't
I didn't
remember
do it.
what
No,
you.
I didn't do that, but I did audition for things, and I think that I moved to New York in like '82.
Mhm.
That was a rough time in New York, So, and I was, you know, fairly paranoid and nervous, and I mean, it was good that I had school and friends that I was going to school with to, bond with and whatnot, but I wasn't very adventurous. Um, and in the summer, I would like do summer stock. Um,
Mhm.
and that was great training. That was really great training. Um, yeah. But then it was random. Like I was auditioning and stuff. And then one of my classmates, I went to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, and one of my classmates said, "You should call this agent that I've been working with." And I'm like, "Well, what do you do?" And she's like, "I'm like a promotional like model." Well, what does that mean? So basically this agency would place you, at a department store and you'd spray perfume or cologne or whatever. But it was decent money back then, I think. And so the very first job I got was when Bonwit Teller opened at Trump Tower. Sorry, I
Oh
don't
my
mean to use
God,
that name.
Lee. No, that's classic. That is really a classic image.
And
Bonwit Teller at Trump Tower.
and I was hired to work for Christian Dior, and so they had like their national makeup artist there doing makeovers, and I was spraying perfume or cologne, I don't remember. And I was fascinated by his work, and I was like watching him. And I think I was there for like 3 days. And towards the end, he said, "You're interested in this, aren't you?" And I said, "Well, it's just fascinating to me." And he was like, "Well, would you like to learn?" And I was like, "Sure." I'm telling you, within 6 months, I became the national makeup artist for Christian Dior. Alan and I split the territory. And I was like being sent all over the country to make appearances. And I had never like stayed in a hotel by myself. It was wild. But it gave me a taste of like making money. It was decent for that. And you know, when I was doing summer stock, I was, making $25 a week.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
Kathy Lee Gifford's little girls make more than that.
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah, so it sort of gave me a taste of, corporate life and whatnot. And I don't know, to be flown around and given an expense account. And I mean, it was wild. It was wild. I did that for a while. I was really good at it and I really liked it, but it wasn't It wasn't something that I wanted to pursue like as a career. In fact, that's what when we met in Chicago, I just called the office in New York and I'm like, I'm in Chicago if anything opens up. And there was I don't even think it was full time, or it might have been temporary at Lord and Taylor. And so I was there for a bit. And that, was a good way to make some money. And yeah, so I don't know where that
No,
detour
well,
came from.
because I was asking you about, again, like starting back in Philly and then New York, and it's interesting that again, that's another puzzle piece that filled in for me because, you know, like you said, you never in a million years would you have imagined that you would now become a national makeup artist representing a major
Yeah,
brand.
no,
Like
no,
that was that wasn't on the list of goals,
no,
but there it was,
no.
and it gave you this opportunity to, like you said, not only make cash but travel around, stay in a hotel, to have allowances, things that like most people don't even realize like are all these aspects of people either have this kind of a lifestyle or they don't.
Right. And I was like 20, I mean, or
Hmm.
21 or something. I mean,
Hmm.
crazy, but a great experience, like a really good experience.
Hmm. Well, it's funny because I actually didn't come out of school or any formal education until after 1985. By no means did I ever expect that I was going to become a makeup and hair artist because I had been fine art and pre-med and film. For
Oh, I didn't know you
me,
were pre-med.
oh yeah,
Wow.
I yeah, I couldn't continue because I didn't have the money.
Wow, I had no idea. No idea. That's crazy.
That's
Crazy.
I'm so science oriented. I'm
Wow.
so healing oriented. I still feel like I'm guiding people or now, putting them together with like, so what do you got going on? And let me see how we can.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to play doctor. I just really am. Matter of fact, 3 years ago, before the pandemic, my internist, and I thought he was really kidding me. He's a very dry, very smart man. And he said, you need to go back to med school. And I said, I don't know if you're kidding me right now. And he was like, no, I'm not kidding you at all. We need doctors like you. And I was like, okay, wait a minute. I'm not a doctor. Let's call it spade a
I
spade.
just play one
He's
on
like,
TV.
yeah. And he was like, no, 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 seriously, you need to go back to medical school. He's like, by
Too
60, you'll be
funny.
out. Yeah. And so the truth is I'm still very, very passionate about it. And and the truth is I would probably be very geared towards, I mean, I like hearing, I like a lot of things, but I'd probably lean into women's subject matters. um I would just personally be broaching all subjects in the sense of just putting the conversation on the table so people could break down that fourth wall and not have that fear of talking or just somebody very casually talking about things that then is also teaching while entertaining. That's who I think of myself as.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
so that's why I think I would be an asset in that world or that realm.
Yeah.
So, and I think for me, it's ironic when I think about meeting you at that counter because I was traveling around for Clinique. I was just trying to pay the bills, Lee. Man, I had so much debt from school. I had so many responsibilities. I didn't have, it didn't feel like I had choices. It felt like I just had to. Felt like I was
Right.
just like one foot needed the next foot, needed the next foot.
Right. Right.
And as a freelance artist, that was not, there was no guarantee basement, ground
Right.
floor,
Right.
foundational income. It was just like, where do you get the next breadcrumb from? And it was just a scarcity mindset that
Right. Of
I
course.
hadn't been around, but
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so when I met you, it was really like, how did this like This was not the plan. This was not the plan.
Or maybe it was.
Or maybe it was. I love that you had the opportunity to listen to my conversation with Lee in part 1. Next week's part 2, continue our conversation as we continue to pull back and ask questions about things that we've experienced together and apart, and how life is taking us in directions that never could have been predicted. In the meantime, join, subscribe, share, and listen on any of your favorite listening platforms, and be a part of the Camp Fifi Uncensored podcast community, where the spirit is young, the soul is wise, and the life stories are vast, and where we talk about everything from soup to nuts, or what I like to say, from cannolis to egg in the holes, and don't forget the s'mores. It's where anything and everything is open for discussion. So be a part of this community where we have real connection and real conversations, and really share from an authentic position. I look forward to you joining next week. Bye for now.
He came back and he handed me a book. I don't remember who wrote it. It was called Personhood, The Art of Being Fully Human. And basically, it was a very simple book, but basically the concept was the most important thing that you can do as a human being is to love others and love yourself, and then give and receive love. Like that's the most important thing.
Welcome to Camp Fifi Uncensored, episode 59, part 2, with my dear friend Lee Lessack, as we continue our conversation about all great opportunities, living your best life, dreaming big, because everything is possible. I look forward to you sitting down, listening in on your favorite platform, and joining us for part 2 of our conversation. Here we go. By no means have I have a lot. Listen, when you and I met each other, not only was I figuring that out as you were figuring your stuff out,
Right.
But then, again, a series of life decisions made it where I have nothing but pride in how all the roadmap has led to what it's led to.
Of course.
There's definitely been moments, though, like you said, that were never roads that you had ever walked down. I had never walked down. You unfortunately saw me go through things like domestic violence, things that nobody would have seen the writing on the wall of. Grateful to still be here to have this conversation.
Right?
Yeah.
And things that I'm sure, I never asked you about this, and not to put you on the spot, but that couldn't have been comfortable for you as my friend to see me going through. Like, do you have any memory of any of that? I'm just curious.
Oh, I have very strong memories of that, because I think that was
Would
also
you
a
share
period
with
of time
me?
where we were in very close contact. And I remember, like, you would be in trouble and you would call me and I would rescue you. You would either come stay with me or whatever. And then you kept going back. And I remember saying to you, I think you're going to keep doing this dance until your feet get really tired. And hopefully it won't kill you in the process. because it's really hard for the people that love you to watch you go through this and to make decisions that are not really good. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
it's a process, and you were in it, and it's your process. I mean, I have a friend now, all these years later, that was in a very similar situation but different, and he kept like going back, and I was just like, I just don't. I mean, it's very foreign to me because it's just not something that is in our home. So it's sort of a foreign concept to begin with. But I remember that. It was a very, in fact, I think towards the end, in an effort to like really get your attention, I cut myself off because I
Yeah.
couldn't watch you walk through that door again. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It was really
Yeah.
painful. So
Yeah.
anyway, thank God that's passed.
No, and listen, to your point, I mean, I think that, trust me, I remember the cutoff. And I also think never in a million blessed years would I've ever seen myself walking through that situation. And no way in hell, if I had been on the other side of the street like you were, would I have understood the keep going back. And it's an interesting thing because you know what, Lee? Like, I would never have asked for that to be a part of my journey.
Right.
The gift out of that, as morbid as this may sound, is that my level of empathy and understanding for that whole sickness and that whole world of narcissism and sociopathic entities and environments and abuse and all that, I would never have understood that whole manifestation of that animal had it not. Now, did I want to be in the center of that? No. Would I ask for that to? No. But who I am today, and the knowledge and the understanding and the science of the mind and all the things, like, look at, I could smell out a president who was entering into office as going, hey man, you United States citizens who may not understand things like domestic violence, hey, by the way, like any one of us who walked into blindly a domestic violent relationship, by the way, you're all in a domestic violent relationship now. Note to self, you've all just laid your head on the pillow in the bed with a violent abuser. Prepare yourself. How do you prepare yourself? You can't possibly be prepared for the lies, the deceit, the crazy making, all the things that our country preceded and continues to experience. Why? Because you're with a fucking narcissistic sociopath who does not have any attachment to his actions. He has no feeling to his cause and effect. It's everything domestic violence is, sadly. Everything.
Yeah.
So, to my point, no, it sucked being in 5 years of that. And more importantly, what sucked was having my relationships like yours affected with me, because I loved and adored you. And I wanted, and I tried so many times to get away.
Sure. Look, there's no rule book. There's no playbook for this kind of thing. So everybody's just doing the best they can with whatever, inkling of knowledge they think they have.
And the level of threats that I experienced and the things that I was tied to, that I just really didn't want anybody else to have, to go through any more than what you were already witnessing.
Right. I'll never forget. You finally got the courage to call 911, and this individual was arrested and great and in jail. And I was just like, thank God. And you were doing great. And then he got released, and I do believe that you went and picked him up.
Oh, I know I did. Yes, no, and I couldn't. No, it's
and
gross.
That just like, yeah.
And that was
the thing
just
is that
Yeah.
That's the thing, is that I think that people like that have such control over you, and um, you you share parts of your life like confidentially with them, and then they use that to control you.
And you know
You
what?
know, so
The thing about it is we're producing more of those kind of characters than ever before. So when I went through it over 30 years ago, and it's a long time ago. I mean, I've lived a lot of life since, and
yeah, for sure.
and that's the beauty, and succeeded and thrived in lots of ways. That's the beauty. But again, to that point, what's interesting is I went through that. Not that abuse hadn't happened in people's lives before, it just wasn't talked about. I mean, when I went and got the tools that I got post all of that, these were conversations people weren't having. They don't want to have. It's people most of the time don't even want to be confronted with things that aren't anything but
Right.
like, what's in that pastry puff? Ooh, is that sweet cream? Like, like they want to keep it really up here. And that's great.
I get it.
Do I want to bring into the conversation the depths of something uncomfortable like domestic violence? My point
Right.
is we are, as a society, surrounded by these kind of entities, these kind of humans. Like I said, we put leaders into positions who are these people.
Yep.
And if we're not careful of the
Crazy.
character study, and so I feel the gift for me was that I went down paths earlier than many other people have. I just was kind of like pioneering, and it's not like, ooh, so that's the badge that you were looking for. No. It's just, I think that awareness makes for a great teacher, and the
Yeah.
ability to guide. And I think that was just part of my greater purpose
Right.
coming through it.
Yeah.
But to your point, trust. In that first 4 months, I would have loved to have said I never looked back, or I would never have felt threatened, or I would never have had the fear of God put in me, or the honeymoon that it's statistically written about. No different again than your country has promised, and then you get backhanded slapped, and all this other shit evolves. Again, it's parallel to behind closed doors between two people is what our country on a massive level was exposed to.
Yeah.
And only for that reason. And then ironically, Lee, I wrote about that the night he was inaugurated. And I posted it on Facebook. And my mom had just had her first stroke and came out of the hospital. And my mom was very political and was on Facebook a lot. And the two things she wanted to get home to was to get on Facebook and to see her cats. And as crazy as that sounds, she sees my post of this, like, from a domestic violence perspective, like, hey, United States citizens, by the way. She's like, oh my God, I just saw your post. It's absolutely brilliant. Now you got to take it down. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, all of a sudden, my mom, who would never talk like this, like, I'm now fearing what she's saying. And she's like, it is so eloquent what you wrote. She says, but I don't know who you work with. And I don't know who is a Trump follower. And I don't know how this could affect your work. And I just wanted you to be careful. And so I took it down, and I remember I didn't even know how to take it down. I just knew that because it was so early for me in social media world, that I ended up photographing and eliminating. And it wasn't until this new election, and my mother, I can't remember if she had already passed or was going, coming upon passing, or she, was now so many strokes in. And I got the courage to post this piece again, because I thought it was such an important conversation to have. And people were more ready to have that conversation after now having had 4 years of what the fuck has just been what we did. And that was my feeling. What did I just live through? How did this just happen? How did I? And thank God I survived it. And thank God I'm here to talk about it. But I never got to have that conversation with you. And I just want to say how sorry I am that, not because I did anything wrong, but that we lost that time together. And I know that I was really hurting, and I know that you were really hurting for me. And I just want to acknowledge you for that. And I just want to, none of these things that we go through in life, I think, are ever easy. I think they can be easy. I don't think that there has to be struggle. By no means do I think there has to be drama, struggle, or anything. I think things should just be able to fall into one's lap.
I agree.
Yeah, so I am definitely all for that. And I know how to live that kind of peaceful ease of balanced life. And I definitely think darkness is drawn to light. And I will acknowledge in a very humble way, I think I exude a lot of light to people, so much so that they try to keep dimming it down. Does that make sense? And I've been in an industry that actually sadly likes to do that, especially depending upon the position and the role you play, which doesn't, for somebody who wants to heal people and somebody who wants to bring light and enlighten them, that just is like counterintuitive. So I find that, I just want to acknowledge that and say thank you for having been there for me, even in moments that maybe I didn't even see, because it was enough to just try to stay alive,
Sure.
And that's not being dramatic. That's just a statement.
Yeah.
Not to switch gears so dramatically, ironically, but I want to ask you a question, because in the early 80s, I graduated 84, 85, and it was like 84, 85 or 83, 84 is basically what I remember as AIDS coming to the forefront. And it was right also around that time, as I was starting to get in fashion, or I was in fashion coming up but in my own independent track, where gay men could come out in the workforce, could really start to like be acknowledged, because this milk movement, all the things that were happening. How did that personally affect your path? Like,
It's so funny. Someone just asked me this last week. Isn't that weird?
Oh, interesting.
About, living in New York at that time. Like, I moved to New York in 1982. And, I don't even know how much I was aware. I mean, we knew something was bad, and, so it was hard because I had, I came out in college, and once I moved to New York. And so it was very new, but I was so petrified and paranoid. So I never went out or, So I'm lucky because I'm still here. And, there wasn't, I don't recall there being like a huge amount of data or information. I don't know what they knew at that time. Yeah, it was at the very onset,
Yeah,
I know.
because I know that by the time I was getting into fashion print, there was so many people dying left and right.
Yeah.
In the world of hair and makeup, in the print world.
Oh yeah. I mean, I do remember losing so many friends, which was so bizarre, because who loses friends when you're in your 20s? You know what I mean?
Exactly. Well, and also to that point, like in college, I mean, it was an exploratory time, and it was a time
Mhm.
where you didn't feel like, I mean, we as women had rights to our bodies, we had rights to birth control, we had the rights to choose our partners, we had all these things. And certainly in the environments that I was involved, that I was getting my education, certainly in my last school, there was just, I was with people who I really liked and was smart and was, just all the things. And so there was no limitations.
Right,
And then boom, you get out of college, and all of a sudden there's this thing called AIDS. And you're just like, what can you touch? Who can you
right,
touch? What can you do? And it wasn't even about being frivolous. It was just about the unknown.
correct, correct. Sort of like
So
navigating a pandemic,
a little bit. It is a pandemic. It is a different form of it. It
you
is a
know?
different pandemic. And that was the
Crazy.
pandemic of the early 80s for certain.
Hmm.
And they're still trying to get a grip on that. Certainly,
And
thankfully,
I do think one thing that the gay community has shown throughout history, but specifically with the AIDS epidemic, is they came. It was not easy because they didn't have a lot of information. They came to action,
mhm,
and they band together in such a strong way. And so, like, I noticed um, this summer when I was traveling back to Lisbon, and there was like all this talk about monkeypox and whatnot.
yeah,
And do you know? And so I was like, oh, maybe I should get that vaccine. I'm getting every other booster. Why
yeah,
not? But you couldn't. It wasn't. They ran out. Whatever. They turned that around so quickly. By the time I got home, nobody was really talking about it anymore because the community knew what this looks like and this is what needs to be done. And so, you know, I applaud them because it's I mean, look, just based on the last 3 years, I feel like we are going to be navigating pandemic for the rest of our lives. But
absolutely.
now at least we know what that is. If you think back to when the first COVID vaccine came out, in January, and we were, sitting in line at Dodger Stadium for hours. And now this last booster came out, and you just make an appointment at cvs.com, and so we figured that out as well.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely think that I mean, look at, I shared this story that coming from a medical background, vaccinations, I've always been pro science. That doesn't mean take the pill just because somebody says take a pill. And I'm not saying don't ask questions. No, on the contrary. But I've also been somebody who believed in masks and gloves all along because transference of fluids. I mean, it's
Right.
fluids and it's
Yeah.
airborne stuff that creates
Yeah.
all of this stuff.
Look, I
So
have
it's
like
common sense.
OCD, so the masks and gloves and being able to freely whip out my medical grade wipe on a plane, as opposed to like, not wanting to call attention.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
like, I have something to do.
I've arrived.
I mean, I'll never forget. Where was I flying? Oh, I was flying to Florida, like March 2nd, 2020. I had a 6-week concert tour, which collapsed after one performance. And they were just starting to talk about this COVID thing. And so, like, I'm on the plane. Nobody was masked yet. That was new. But
No.
like the woman next to me took out like a sanitizer wipe. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do the same thing. And then
Yeah,
I
yeah,
remember
yeah.
flying home from Florida. People were like tossing the white container up and down the aisle because everybody was, made me so happy.
Well,
Yeah.
and ironically, like literally 2 months before that, I'm a personal on a show to the leading man, and his hairdresser that crack of dawn Monday morning opens the trailer door, and I take one look at her face, and I'm like, and she's at the base of the stairs, and I look down at her, and I can tell without her even opening her mouth, she is so ill. I don't even know what she's doing there. And I looked at her, and I literally said, "What are you doing here? You do not look well." And she's like, "I'm so sick." I'm like, "Why didn't you call? Like, you got to go home. You can't be here. You're like wildfire. You step in here and you will set off this whole room to become sick." That's how viral she was. I literally went to my drawer, Lee. This is January 2020, because I always have this. I went to my drawer, I got out a K95 and gloves, and I put it on because I knew our actor was going to be coming in anytime now. And I had a responsibility to myself and to him. That whole trailer rolled their eyeballs at me. And I was like, roll your eyeballs all you want.
Right. That was January, so that was really early.
It was really early, but it's the mindset of people's lack of sensitivity and ability to understand that always makes me kind of feel like an outsider, for no better word. Like, I'm very much, I know, a leader and a person that brings people together, but there's moments like that where I'm like, what planet do I live on, and what planet do you live on that we just don't see eye to eye? Because it's okay to agree to not agree, but this is really straightforward. How this is not really straightforward.
I know.
So
I know.
Again, just an interesting observation. So when you came out, like, first off, did your parents have any statements, or were they?
I had come out to my sister when I was in high school, so she already knew. And then I had moved. It's so funny. So I went to Penn State University for a hot minute. I don't know why I never read or paid attention to the fact that they had 48,000 students. And so I go to this school, and I'm just I'm like, this big. It was too much for me. So, but one of the things that you had to do as a theater major is you had to be on crew for one of their productions. And so they were doing a production of Grease, and I signed up to be like costume crew. And so one of my jobs was like to do like the quick change dresser for the guy that was playing Teen Angel, who was so attractive. I don't think I ever said one word to him, but I just did my job. You know what I mean?
I love it.
And then I moved to New York, and I was like at a piano bar in the Village, and it was down below, and I'm walking up the stairs to leave, and he's walking in, and he was like, "Lee?" And that was my first boyfriend.
Oh, I love that.
He was a horrible boyfriend, but I just talked to him when I was in Lisbon, and I see him all the time, and he's great. But he was my first boyfriend. So then when I had like a boyfriend, I felt more secure to tell my parents. So I went home one weekend and told them. And oddly enough, my mom is the one that had it was like a shock. My mother's like the gayest person we know. Am I right?
Yeah, right? She is. But we could talk about Rosh Hashanah walking down Lakeshore Drive.
He was in shock. And my dad went to his office or room or whatever, and he came back and he handed me a book. I don't remember who wrote it. It was called Personhood, The Art of Being Fully Human. And basically, it was a very simple book, but basically the concept was the most important thing that you can do as a human being is to love others and love yourself, and then give and receive love. Like that's the most important thing. And that's personhood. And that's all that matters. And that was what my father handed me, which was interesting because my dad growing up, like he didn't know how to communicate with kids, and it was foreign to him. And that was that, you know. My mom had a harder time, but
Well, I think it's so interesting. First off, what a beautiful way for your father, even if he couldn't verbally put it
right.
into words himself, that he could hand you a tool that
Yeah,
basically said, I love you, be you.
right. Yeah,
If you never
yeah,
read the book, I love you, be you.
right.
Your mom, who, like you said, would be like, Cher, Bette Midler, all the things wrapped up into one combination. I could see how she would be the mom who would be like, I know, but I don't want to admit.
Right.
I know, but I don't want to acknowledge. I know, but this is my son that I
Right.
want to have
She doesn't
children with.
remember. She doesn't remember now. Like my mom is so proud of me. And she,
Yeah.
I remember I was doing, I can't remember what it was, but I was very close with both of my grandmothers. And they would call me every weekend when I lived in New York, every single weekend. And the conversation always went to, when are you getting married?
Yeah.
And so I called my parents and I said, I want to come out to grandma. And they were like, oh no, you can't. She would not, she won't know how to handle it. And, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, she lived through the Holocaust. What is a gay grandson? Like, come on.
Yeah. True.
And my mom, interestingly enough, like prepped her for after the conversation, because I think my grandmother was upset because she was just worried that I wouldn't find happiness.
Yeah.
And my mom shared with me years later that she told her mother, she was like, all of the things that you love about Lee, he's warm and he's sensitive and he's musical and, he's artistic and he's compassionate. And all of those things are many traits that I've experienced in the gay community with people that we know. And I think it was like really helpful for my grandmother to hear that. And I didn't know this until years later. So they've been, they're great. My folks are great. It's just, but it was a time, it was definitely a time. And I think my mom didn't know, she just didn't know like what to say or how to act. And so she just continuously shoved her foot in her mouth.
Well, I haven't seen your parents in a really long time, but I will always hold that sweet image of
Not
her.
much has changed.
But I will hold that sweet image of her as we were walking to Rosh Hashanah on Lakeshore Drive. And I think she was like, this could be possible. This could be my daughter-in-law mentality. And my head wasn't in that
Crazy.
space because I knew what, we were just friends.
Of course.
But it made me giggle inside. And I thought,
I remember.
you know what?
I think we giggled through the entire service, if I recall. I remember. Yeah. Yeah. My parents have been, very supportive, throughout the years. My mom just had a little bit of a hurdle to get over for whatever reason,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and then go ahead. And then she what? I'm sorry.
I said she did. She got over it.
Which is amazing and phenomenal because, life is too precious to waste time.
They lived in Chicago for how many years? 30 years and whatever. Every year my mother would call me on Gay Pride and said, oh my God, the parade was so fun this year. And I'm like, I don't even go to Gay Pride.
Okay. I mean, there she is right there in Boys Town.
She is.
Like right there.
I know.
Did they let go of their place there?
Oh my God. So my parents moved. They had a timeshare on Sanibel Island for years because cousins of theirs had that. And then in 2008, um, my dad's position was dissolved. And, he was whatever, 70 or something. And so they just decided to retire. They were kind of forced into retirement. And so they moved um, full time to Sanibel. They bought a house that they rented out. And then or I think they went for like first a month and then 2 months and then 3 months and then 6 months. So they still did the timeshare thing, but they had bought a house and they rented it. And then they found like their dream house, I don't know, a dozen years ago. And they bought it and they sold the other place. And a year ago, they sold the house and they moved to like a senior community right over the causeway that isn't there anymore because of the hurricane. And they're in this it's literally less than a mile from the causeway to the island. And so many of their friends live there and they love it. So they're there. We did have to evacuate them because there was no electricity, there was no drinkable water. It was bad. It was bad. But
Well,
they're
it's
back
supposedly
and
still extremely bad. I mean, we were just,
well on
my
the
brother and
island.
I, Grant, we're just talking about insurance. His insurance agent and a whole slew of people from just that particular going down there. Like they sent down 65 agents, and the
Yeah,
level of destruction and the level
so
of
bad.
whether people are or aren't insured, what they will or will not. I mean, the
I
loss
know.
is
It's brutal. It's brutal. Thankfully, there's obviously hurricanes nearly every year, but there hasn't been
yeah.
one that hit like this in a long time. And so hopefully that won't happen again. But, it made me really think. I was talking to my sister about it. I'm like, we need another plan because, you know, at 84, they didn't need to be driving through a hurricane to the other coast. Even
No.
if the plan is that we have, a driver established to take them, you know, um, it was stressful. It was very stressful, but they're safe and now they're back in their place.
Okay, well that's good. And I'm happy to hear that. And I'm happy, definitely happy to hear that. I wanna jump to I guess it would have been, is it 92, 93? What year did we go to Oil Can Harry's?
Night, June, this is literally the only date I remember. June 11th, 1992.
June
You
11th,
were there.
1992. I landed here January 11th, 1992.
So
So I
you
don't
just
know
wanted to
why
wait
dates
six
are,
months?
I wanted to wait 6 months, and it's a power number. What can I say? So we
Yeah.
walk into Oil Can Harry's on Ventura Boulevard in Studio City. Why? You wanted to go there, right? Because I wouldn't have known anything about it at
So
the time.
there was a company called RSVP Cruises, and they were producing these all gay cruises. They would like rent a ship and, market to the gay community. And I got a call to perform like in the cabaret room in the lounge. And they offered me like a 10-week contract. So I was like, okay, this is good. And I talked to the Winklers about it. And I remember Henry said, you have to do this. Like, this is such a great opportunity. Um, and we totally support you. And the only thing we ask is that when you're done, you come back. And I had no expectation they would hold my job. So off I go. And it was like, I don't know, 5 weeks in the Caribbean and then 5 weeks in Mexican Riviera. And when I came back, Stacy was working out with her trainer at the time. And he was like really interested in this cruise and wanted to know like all about it. What was your favorite thing? And I said, well, they had a country Western performer on every cruise, and they would perform up on the pool deck and they would teach two-stepping. And it was always on the night of my concert. So by the time I got up there after, everybody was already dancing. They had taken the lessons, and I just watched because I didn't know what I was doing. But it just looked like so much fun. And he said, well, you know, there's a bar down the street on Ventura Boulevard, and they have two-stepping lessons on Tuesday nights, Tuesdays and Thursdays. And this was a Tuesday. I was like, okay, Phil, what are you doing? And there we are. But here's the crazy thing. I don't even know if you know this part. So Mark, was married for 7 years. He went through a divorce and he was in therapy. He owned a couture line of maternity wear at the time. So he was designing like the Armani version of maternity wear for Melanie Griffith and Vanna White and Kathy Lee Gifford, and that really, really high end. And his pattern maker was on one of the cruises that I was on. And they always had a costume contest. So at the beginning of the cruise, they would say, on the second to last night, we're going to have a costume contest. But the rule is you can only use material that you find on board the ship. Oh. And so this guy made a ball gown, like a hoop skirt, like something out of Tara. And it was all made of those little white paper doilies from the bar and this little straws. I mean, he obviously knew what he was doing. And he, of course, won a free cruise, whatever. And this was a Tuesday, and Mark said, his name was Michael, and Mark said, oh, I totally forgot. I have therapy tomorrow. I didn't do my assignment. And he said, what's your assignment? I have to put myself in a social situation. And he said, well, you should come with me for two-stepping lessons tonight at Oil Can Harry's. And Mark was like, okay. That was that.
Wow. I didn't know the precursor to the story, let alone that part of the story. And now another puzzle piece.
We would have never met, I don't think, unless it was there. We would have never met. And I actually had just gotten I was dating Satan. I don't know if you remember that, but it was awful. And I just remember seeing
Are we talking about Mark?
No.
Oh.
No. Okay. So I won't mention his name because he's no longer with us, and I don't want to. And but he was Satan. But anyway, we had already done the lessons and whatnot, and so I saw Mark, and Mark was tall and strapping, and I noticed that I tended to date people that were smaller than me, and I'm sure that energetically that had something to do with it, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to ask him to dance because I'm not going to feel any crappier than I already do based on my recent breakup, whatever. And so I walked over to him and I was like, do you two-step? And he was like, no. And so I walked away to put my drink down, and he thought I was just leaving. And as Mark tells the story, he was minding his own business, talking to two innocent lesbians. And so then I came back and off we went. And that was that. We've never been there before, and we've never been there after, because, I'm a nice guy, but I'm not the most patient person. And I may have kicked him because he has two left feet. So we decided to
remember how that night ended. I don't remember. I just remember you guys meeting. That's all I remember.
You know what? He gave me his card, and the next day I went to work, and Stace was like, how did it go? And everything. I'm like, I met this really nice guy, and he has a real job. He gave me his card, and she's like, let me see it. And I showed her the card, and she took it. She said, you were not calling him for 48 hours. And I'm like, why? She said, trust me. I was like, okay. So that was on a Tuesday. On Thursday, she gave me the card back.
Oh my God, Stacy.
Yeah. And I called him, and we made a date for that weekend, and that was that.
Yeah. The rest is history.
Yeah.
I don't know if I even know this. Did you guys officially marry one another?
No.
I
I don't like
didn't.
to rush into things. So it's only 30 years.
It's like, did I miss something or are you not
No.
married?
And actually, we were just talking about this, and um, it's complicated, but in Lisbon, when you apply for a mortgage,
Mhm.
any one person on the mortgage, by the time anyone turns 75, the mortgage has to be paid off. So it's good that we're not married because I'll be mortgaging it myself. Yeah.
So sincerely, so if you were a married couple and one person becomes 75 and you still owed a balance, then what would happen?
Well, Mark is 71.
Yeah, yeah,
So if we apply for a mortgage, we get like a 4-year mortgage.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So
That's
yeah,
just, it would be by design, is what you're saying.
yeah,
It wouldn't
yeah.
be like,
So yeah. Um,
do they do conventional mortgages like in America? Do they do 10, 15, 20, 30 year mortgages?
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just very
Interesting.
different there. It's very different. Like when you take out a mortgage there, you have to take out a life insurance policy, and the bank is the beneficiary.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Listen, I
So
do
you
believe.
can
Go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, you can get if you're only financing like 50%, you can do it without life insurance. But if you want to finance 70 or 80%, you have to have a life insurance policy. So it's very expensive.
You know, to that point, and because of my childhood experience with my parents and my father dying so suddenly, and our house being attached to an SBA loan, and him dying without life insurance, it was such an impressionable time of that unknown, that when we bought our house, I said to Randy, we will not buy a house without buying life insurance,
Right.
because we're not married, and whether we're married or not, this is the only way that I know of legitimately to
Yeah, of
protect one
course.
another.
Right. We have life insurance, and
But a
we
lot of
specifically
people,
got it for the amount of for like 50% of the
correct,
loan, so that if one person went, the other person would easily be able to sustain.
correct, correct. Yeah. But it's shocking how many people don't actually. I mean, I know people do think that way, but then there's people who don't think that way. I,
Yeah, yeah.
and so do you did you ever desire to marry me?
Oh gosh. I mean, I'm sure at one point, I mean, I wanted to have kids. I wanted, I had so many dreams. And it just is not the way it worked out this time around. But I'm certainly not complaining. I have a blessed life, and um, so excited for this next chapter. I can't even stand it. And yeah, so I have no complaints.
Do you think that this next chapter has given you not that you were looking for a new lease on life, but a new, like, really, like a rebirth?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's given me something that I'm super excited about.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I've done really well in LA, and I can operate, on cruise control. You know what I mean? And so this is really like charging it up, and I'm excited about that. It's a huge learning curve. I mean, oh my God, visas, and it's a huge learning curve. Um, but I'm doing it, and so it's going to be great. I'm so excited about it. We have and we
Absolutely.
have some we have so many friends over there already. We were counting last month when we were there, and I think it's like 38 or 40 friends. And so like I was there for 5 weeks by myself. Mark came for a week. And I think I like stayed home alone and cooked like maybe 4 nights. Every single night I was meeting friends for dinner, and it's great, so I really feel like there's a great community there and support system, and
And of the 38, 40 people, are most of those expats at this point?
yes.
And are they
Well,
mostly happen
I
to be
have
gay, perchance? Not that that
no,
matters, but because I know you have straight
some,
and
yeah.
a lot of straight friends as well. But do they happen
I
to
mean,
have been people you knew or that you met since you've been over?
only since we've been over. There's a whole Facebook group for Americans in Portugal. And so, I mean, just yesterday, someone posted, we're coming to Lisbon at the end of December. And, um, you know, if anybody knows of a great realtor, maybe you could DM me or whatever. So I like DM this guy, and I'm like, I have a great realtor. We are moving next month. He helped us find an apartment. He's super nice, blah, 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 blah. And so I introduced them on WhatsApp, and then he and I are like texting back and forth, and he must have like gone on my website or something. And he was like, oh my God, one of the shows that I represent in book is called The Boy Band Project. And they're 4 Broadway guys who recreate the harmonies and choreography of your favorite 90s boy band. And he was like, we were just on the Atlantis gay cruise and your boy band project performed like last month.
Amazing.
I'm like, yeah, they're great. I mean, it's like such a tiny, small world, you know? I'll leave you with one other small world story. There was somebody else that posted in the group and said, we live in Los Angeles. We're planning to move to Lisbon, and we need to get 2 golden retrievers over. Anybody have any suggestions? And this is something that I have spent a lot of time researching. And so I sent him a message and I said, I can definitely give you insight. And so we started texting back and forth and blah, blah, blah. It turns out that they were going to be on a scouting trip in August, I think, end of August, in Lisbon. So we made a date to meet for drinks. And I found out like they lived in Hancock Park, near where we used to live and whatnot. And so we're having drinks, and I was like, so how old are your pups? And he's like, we have a 10-year-old and a 1-year-old. And I'm like, a 10-year-old and a 1-year-old. I think you've met Mark, because he came back from breakfast one day and said, I met these 2 guys and they have 2 Goldens, 10 and 1. Like, what are the chances? And I pulled up a picture, and he's like, oh my God, we see him all the time. And he rotates which pup he takes to breakfast. I'm like, yeah, that's Mark. So like, and here we are having drinks on a rooftop in Lisbon.
So cool.
It's crazy. I know. So now last weekend we went over for a puppy play date, and their 1-year-old is insanely fun. And so Paris and their 1-year-old like went at it. I mean, they were literally unconscious for days. It was perfect.
Oh, I love that so much.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know we have to wrap this up. So I'm just going to ask you this. So if your little self, your little boy self was looking into the future and saw you now and where you're headed, like, is this the legacy that you expected, and where you're heading, and what legacy is it that you want to leave behind, even though you're probably going to be on the planet for at least another 30 or more years?
I mean, I don't know if this is the legacy, but I mean, I feel like, first of all, dream big, because anything can happen. I mean, when I think that I have sustained a living for 30 years, and it's like, and I started my career, and my mantra was fake it till you make it. You know what I mean? And literally, and to think that I have been able to sustain that and very successfully for a long time. I'm super proud of that. And I never really felt like I was going to work, because I love what I do. And and I've been able to sort of write my own ticket and schedule and everything else. So I think my legacy would be to dream big, anything is possible. And, you know, um, you and I have been through it. We've had good times and bum times, with work and finances and everything else. And it's really, I'm so glad that I took the chance to like dream big and start these businesses because like even through a pandemic, I had like one of my best years ever, which was great,
Yeah.
and yeah, so I think the little boy would be really proud, you know?
Oh, by all
Yeah,
means. And I think that in just what you were sharing, I think it comes down to mindset. I think it
yeah,
comes down to your attitude and one remaining open to what's possible. And I think that
right.
when you and I, excuse me, when you and I met each other, I do think that it was two big visionaries meeting because I've
Right.
always been a big dreamer. You've always been a big dreamer. I I love that our paths were brought together. I love that our paths keep doing this. I feel like they're doing this while doing this. Like, I always love you. You know,
I sure
you
do. And I feel the exact same way. My little foo.
my
Ah,
Lulu.
I will say that I'm looking here on the screen because I haven't done one of these like in over a year. And
Yeah,
I'm going to be 60 in a few months, and I've had
yeah,
no work done. I think I look pretty
honey.
okay.
You are beyond gorgeous. Matter of fact, you're like a fine wine. You just keep getting better. Sincerely. I think I was blonde when we first met too.
I'm liking this. I'm liking this because you went like dark.
Yeah, and that's a funny thing too. Like I've also like
I like the
kind
blonde.
of gone through my own butterfly status lately. It's like I let go of 40 pounds and I highlighted my hair and people are like, what happened? I'm like, I still feel like Felicia. I don't think anything's changed, maybe for them. And I think to your point about the age part, it's like, and going back to even what you're talking about, the prepping for Portugal, your excitement, the difference between where I think you and I are and who you and I are and have always been is we're curious human beings that never sit on our laurels, however and whatever that
Hmm.
means. Like there's no like right or wrong. It's just to keep going, to keep
Yeah,
getting up, to keep being deliciously curious.
yeah,
Many people
yeah,
at this stage of the game stop being curious and they're like they
yeah.
settle for where they're at. I don't look at things that way. And so I feel
Mm-mm.
like I'm reversing age. I feel like I'm reversing like what's possible. I feel like there's another 30, 40 years of I actually feel like I've been marinating all this time, no matter how much success has been experienced, to really come into my own. Whatever that means, I don't even know what that means yet.
I just want the recipe for your marinade. Okay.
Look, you get a little of this, you get I will happily short I will send it over to Lisbon. How about that?
Beautiful.
That to me was truly a great conversation with me and Lee. Really just so heartfelt, and who knew that so many subjects would be talked of, from domestic violence to being gay to finding one's life partner to being able to create blessings beyond one's wildest dreams because one dreamt big, and the opportunity to make huge life changes that are also very positive. And what I love about this conversation is how applicable it is to all of our lives and how it connects us as human beings and how it's relatable in so many different stories and ways. So Thank you so much for joining us for part 2, episode 59 with my dear friend Lee Lessack. Join us next week as I sit down with Jake Platt from Morph Method, who we have an incredibly salaciously delicious conversation over health and wellness, kicking it off with talking about men and their pride in their health and the importance of taking hold of one's life and really living one's very best life. So join me next week. Look forward to you sharing this beautiful podcast community and being a part of the Camp Fifi Uncensored conversation. See you next week. Bye for now.